My name is Emily Carter. I'm 23 years old. And last Tuesday, my entire family walked into my office without an appointment. The receptionist buzzed me first. Her voice sounded careful. The way people sound when they're not sure if they're about to interrupt something important or step into something uncomfortable. Emily, there are 3 people here. They say they're family. I didn't answer right away. I had a draft of my speech open on my laptop. 4 days from now. I was supposed to stand in front of 300 people at a business awards gala and talk about growth, resilience, and opportunity. I had rewritten the middle paragraph at least 10 times. The part about my grandmother was solid. The part about everything else still felt unfinished. Do they have an appointment? I asked. No. Of course they didn't. I leaned back in my chair and looked out the window. 14 floors up. Downtown Hartford looked clean and organized. Traffic moved like it had somewhere to be. People walked fast, dressed like they had deadlines. Nobody down there knew anything about the 3 people standing in my lobby. Send them up, I said. I stood, straightened my blazer, and moved the speech off my screen. Blank document. Clean. Neutral. I didn't need them reading anything personal over my shoulder like they used to read everything else in my life. The elevator chimed a minute later. I could hear it through the glass wall of my office. I didn't go out to greet them. I stayed exactly where I was. The door to the main floor opened, and I saw them step out one by one. My father walked first. Robert Carter. Same posture I grew up with. Shoulders back. Chin slightly raised. Like he expected the room to adjust to him. The suit was familiar. Navy. Slightly too tight now. He'd probably had it for over a decade. Behind him was my brother, Jason. Hands in his pockets. Looking around like he was trying to figure out if he belonged there or not. He didn't. And behind him, my mother, Linda. Smaller than I remembered. She held her purse with both hands like it might steady her. They walked past rows of desks. 40 employees. Screens lit up. People working. Nobody stopped. Nobody looked impressed. Nobody knew who they were. That part mattered. For most of my life, my father walked into rooms like he owned them. People knew his name. They shook his hand. They listened when he spoke. Here, he was just a man in a suit that didn't fit quite right. The receptionist led them into the conference room. Glass walls. Long walnut table. 12 chairs. The kind of room designed for decisions that actually meant something. Emily will be with you shortly, she said. I gave it a minute. Not to be dramatic. Just enough time to make it clear this was my schedule. Not theirs. Then I picked up a legal pad and walked in. My mother saw me first. She made a sound I hadn't heard before. Not a word. Not exactly a cry. Something in between. Her hand went to the edge of the table like she needed to hold onto something solid. My father didn't move at first. He just looked around the room. Then at me. Then back at the room again. Like he was doing the math. Jason stared. Actually stared. Like I was a version of me he hadn't prepared for. I kept my expression neutral. Professional. Please. Have a seat. I said. Can I get you water or coffee? Nobody answered that. They sat down anyway. My father took the head of the table out of habit. Then hesitated. Then shifted one chair over. It was subtle. But I noticed. I sat across from them. For a second, nobody spoke. Then my father cleared his throat. You've done well for yourself, Emily. He nodded once, like he was approving a report. I let the silence sit there for a beat longer than comfortable. Thank you, I said. How can I help you today? That was the moment everything shifted. Not when they walked in, not when they saw the office. That question, because it forced them to answer something they weren't ready to say out loud. Jason leaned forward first. Hey. It's been a while. We just thought we'd come by. You know? Reconnect a little. Reconnect. 5 years. No calls that mattered. No real apologies. No effort that cost them anything. Now they wanted to reconnect. I nodded slightly. Like I would if a potential client said something vague in a first meeting. Okay. I said, in what capacity? Jason blinked. What? In what capacity? I repeated. Are you here as family? Or is this a business conversation? My father's jaw tightened. Don't start with that tone, he said. We're your parents. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't lean forward. I didn't do anything except look directly at him. You showed up without notice. I said, I have a full schedule today. I just need to understand what this meeting is about. The room went quiet again, through the glass. I could see one of my designers glance over, then quickly look back at her screen. The office kept moving. Phones rang. Someone laughed near the coffee station. Normal life. My father adjusted his cuffs. We're here because we're family, he said. Too much time has passed. It's time to move forward. Move forward. Like the past 5 years were a scheduling issue. Jason jumped in again. And, I've got a few things I'm working on. Business-wise. I figured maybe you could take a look. Give me your perspective. Of course. There it was. I reached into my folder and slid a business card across the table. My consulting rate is $350 an hour. I said, if you'd like. My assistant can schedule you. Jason stared at the card like it had personally offended him. My father didn't touch it. My mother looked at me. Really looked. Like she was trying to figure out when exactly she stopped recognizing me. And for a second, I almost said something softer. Almost. But then I remembered the kitchen table. I remembered the number. I remembered the silence. And I didn't. I sat back in my chair, pen resting on the legal pad, and waited. Because whatever they came here for, it wasn't just a visit. And whatever they thought they were walking into, it wasn't the same girl who left 5 years ago with $340 and no one on her side. Not even close. If you want to understand why they were sitting in that room like they didn't know where to put their hands, you need to go back to the day my father decided my future was negotiable. To understand why they were standing in my office that day, you need to understand how my father ran our house. We didn't call it control growing up. We called it how things are. My father, Robert Carter, worked as a regional manager for an insurance company in Hartford. Every morning, same routine. Suit pressed, shoes polished, coffee black. Out the door, by 7:15. He liked things predictable, clean, efficient. And most importantly, under his authority, money in our house didn't just exist. It was directed, approved, monitored. Every dollar had a decision attached to it. And every decision belonged to him. My mom didn't have her own credit card until she was in her 40s. I didn't realize how strange that was until much later. At the time, it just felt normal. She'd ask before buying groceries. Not because we couldn't afford them, but because that was the system. Just checking with your father? She'd say. It wasn't a partnership. It was clearance. And if my dad said no, that was the end of it. No discussion. No negotiation. Just a quiet shift in the room. Like everyone understood, the air had changed. Then there was my brother, Jason Carter, 3 years older than me, 6 inches taller. And in my father's eyes, the closest thing to a guaranteed return on investment. Jason got the newest laptop every fall. Not because he asked louder, but because my dad decided it made sense. He needs the right tools, he'd say. Like he was explaining a business expense. Jason played travel baseball. That meant weekends out of state, hotel rooms, gas, team fees. My dad never complained about the cost. Not once. He'd drive hours just to watch him play. Sitting in those fold-out chairs with a coffee in hand, talking to other parents. Like he was already planning Jason's future out loud. When Jason needed space to focus, I got moved out of my room and into the half-finished attic. I was 12. The ceiling sloped so low on one side I couldn't stand up straight. In the winter, it was cold. In the summer, it felt like a closed oven. But it made sense. According to my father, Jason needs a proper environment. He said. That phrase came up a lot. Proper environment. Real opportunity. Long-term potential. Jason had all of it. I had chores, dishes, laundry, keeping the house running, while my mom tried to stay ahead of everything my father expected without ever saying what he expected out loud. I didn't argue. Not because I agreed, but because arguing in that house didn't go anywhere. It just made things quieter. And when things got quiet in our house, it didn't feel peaceful. It felt like you'd done something wrong and hadn't figured out what yet. I found my space somewhere else. Drawing. I was good at it. Not in the way people say to be nice. Actually good. My art teacher pulled me aside once after class and told me I had strong spatial instincts. That was her phrase. She said people built careers on that. Architecture. Design. Real work. I believed her. For about a week. Then I brought home a portfolio. I remember setting it on the kitchen counter. My dad was reading something on his phone. I waited until he looked up. Can you take a look at this? I asked. He flipped through maybe 3 pages. Drawing isn't a career. Emily, he said, already handing it back. It's a hobby. That was it. No follow-up. No questions. No. What do you want to do with it? Just a label. Hobby. I nodded like that made sense. Picked it up. And went upstairs. I didn't stop drawing. I just stopped showing him. If there was one thing in our house that felt equal, it was the college funds. My grandparents on my mom's side had set up accounts for both of us when we were born. Same amount. Same structure. It was the one thing that didn't seem influenced by my father's opinions. At least that's what I thought. Every Thanksgiving, my dad would bring it up, like it was part of his annual report. Both my kids are set, he'd say, standing at the head of the table with a glass of wine. 175,000 each. Their future is covered. People loved that. Relatives would nod. Compliment him. Say things like, "That's great planning." Or, "You're a good father." He never corrected them. I remember looking around the living room after one of those dinners. Walls covered in framed photos. Jason in a baseball uniform. Jason holding a trophy. Jason at some school event. Shaking hands with someone important. There was one photo of me. A Christmas picture from years earlier. Half my face blocked by my dad's shoulder. I used to tell myself it didn't matter. That the money was what counted. That when the time came, I'd have the same starting line. I held on to that longer than I should have. Because in that house, nothing was actually equal. Not attention. Not expectations. Not investment. Jason wasn't just the favorite. He was the plan. And I wasn't even part of the conversation. Looking back, I don't think my father ever saw it as unfair. He saw it as logical. If you have 2 options, you put your resources into the one you believe will pay off. That's how he approached everything. Work, money, family. And for a long time, I didn't question it. I adjusted to it. I stayed quiet. I stayed out of the way. I did what was expected. And I built my own little world where his opinions didn't reach as far. But there's a limit to how long you can live like that before something breaks. And in our house, that moment didn't come slowly. It showed up one morning at the kitchen table. With a printed business plan, a cup of coffee, and a decision that would cost me everything my grandparents had set aside for me. And the worst part wasn't what my father said. It was who stayed silent while he said it. I remember the exact moment I stopped asking my father what he thought about my future. It wasn't dramatic. No yelling. No argument. No big scene. Just a quiet shift that happened so cleanly, it almost felt normal. I had spent weeks putting together that portfolio, not just random sketches. Real work, floor layouts, interior concepts, perspective drawings. I stayed up late figuring out from YouTube videos and whatever free resources I could find online. I didn't have fancy tools, just a cheap set of pencils, a ruler, and a lot of trial and error. My teacher had told me to take it seriously. She said people paid good money for this kind of thinking. That I wasn't just drawing, I was solving space. That stuck with me, so I treated it like it mattered. I organized everything. Clean pages. Labeled sections. I even printed out the summer program application she recommended. It was at a design school I'd never heard of before. But when I looked it up, it felt real. Like something I could actually aim for. All I needed was for my father to look at it and say, "Okay, let's figure this out." That was it. Not approval. Just consideration. I waited until the timing felt right. Dinner was over. My mom was at the sink. Jason wasn't home. It was just me and my dad in the kitchen. I placed the portfolio on the counter. "Can you take a look at this?" I said. He didn't ignore me. I'll give him that. He put his phone down. Flipped through a few pages. Paused for maybe 4 seconds total. Then closed it. "Drawing isn't a career, Emily," he said. "It's a hobby." Same tone he'd use if I asked for a new phone case or something unnecessary. Not harsh. Not emotional. Just final. I stood there for a second, waiting for something else. Maybe a follow-up. Maybe a question? Maybe even a suggestion. Nothing came. He picked his phone back up. Conversation over. I nodded. Said, "Okay," and took the portfolio back upstairs. That was the last time I showed him anything I made. After that, I kept it to myself. I still drew. Still practiced. Still got better. But it stopped being something I shared and turned into something I protected, because once someone decides something about you, especially someone like my father, they don't revisit it. They file it away. And in his mind, I had already been categorized. Not serious. Not practical. Not worth investing in. A hobby. The thing is, I didn't stop believing in it right away. That took a little longer. Because there was one thing that still felt like it gave me a chance. The college fund. My grandparents had set it up before I even understood what money really meant. Same amount for me and Jason. Same structure. It wasn't tied to performance or opinions. It just existed, and my father talked about it like it was guaranteed. Every year. Same speech. "Both my kids are taken care of." He'd say, 175,000 each. They can go wherever they want. People would nod like that was the end of the conversation. And for a while, I believed it. I told myself I didn't need his approval because when the time came, I'd have the resources to make my own decisions. If I wanted to go into design, I could. If I wanted to try something different, I could. That money represented options. Freedom. In a way. Looking back, I realize I wasn't trusting the system. I was trusting the promise. And those are two very different things. Because in our house, promises weren't fixed. They were flexible. Depending on what made sense to my father at the time. Jason didn't have to justify anything he wanted. If he said he needed something, my dad found a reason it made sense. New equipment. Travel costs. Programs. Opportunities. It's an investment. He'd say. That word again. Everything in our house came down to investment. Return. Potential. And Jason always came out ahead in that equation. I didn't think too much about it at the time. Not because I didn't notice, but because I didn't believe it would affect me in the one place that actually mattered. The college fund felt separate, protected, intouchable. I held on to that idea, even when things around me didn't support it. Even when my dad dismissed what I cared about. Even when my mom stayed quiet instead of stepping in. Even when Jason joked about my art thing, like it was something temporary I'd grow out of. I told myself, it doesn't matter. When the time comes, I'll have my chance. That belief carried me through my senior year. Application. Deadlines. Planning for something beyond that house. I didn't have everything figured out. But I had direction. And more importantly, I had something I thought was mine. What I didn't understand yet was that in my father's world, nothing was truly mine, if he believed it could be used more effectively somewhere else. And I definitely didn't realize that he had already started thinking that way. Because while I was planning my future quietly, trying to make something out of what I had, Jason was preparing something else entirely. Not for himself, for both of us. And the next time we all sat down at that kitchen table, it wasn't going to be a discussion, it was going to be a decision. One that had already been made before I even walked into the room, the morning it happened. Nothing felt unusual. That's the part people don't expect. No tension in the air, no warning signs. Just a regular Sunday morning. Coffee brewing. Toast in the toaster. Sunlight coming through the kitchen window like it always did. I was at the sink, rinsing dishes from breakfast. My mom stood a few feet away, wiping the counter. Moving slower than usual, but not enough for me to question it. Then Jason walked in, blazer on. Not something he wore at home. Still had the price tag tucked inside the sleeve like he wanted it to be seen. He carried a plastic binder under his arm. The kind you'd use for a school presentation. That should have been the first clue. He sat down across from my dad like he was about to run a meeting. "Got a minute?" he said. My dad looked up from his coffee. "Go ahead." Jason opened the binder and slid a stack of printed pages onto the table. "I've been working on a plan," he said. "Long term." I turned off the faucet, but didn't move. Just stood there with my hands resting on the edge of the sink. Listening. Jason started talking. MBA programs. Top tier. Networking. Career trajectory. Then a startup idea layered on top of that. Something in consulting. Digital strategy. A lot of words that sounded important without actually saying much. He talked like he'd already decided it was going to work. Like the only thing missing was funding. "I ran the numbers," he said, tapping the paper. "Total investment. Around 175. 175. I felt that number before I reacted to it, because I knew exactly where it came from. My dad leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, listening the way he always did when something interested him, not interrupting, not questioning, just evaluating. Jason kept going. "I'm serious about this," he said. "This is the kind of move that sets everything up long term." Then he paused. And that's when he said it. "You've got 2 education funds sitting there. I only need 1. I didn't move. Didn't speak. Didn't even fully process it yet. He said it so casually it almost didn't register as what it actually was. "And Emily," he added, glancing in my direction without really looking at me. "I mean, what's she going to do with it?" "She draws." He said it like he was describing a hobby someone picks up for a few weeks and forgets about. Not cruel. Not emotional. Just dismissive. Like I wasn't even part of the equation. I stood there. Maybe 10 feet away. Hands still damp from the sink. Waiting for my dad to say something. Anything. A correction. That's not how this works. A reminder that the money wasn't his to redistribute based on preference. Instead, my dad nodded. Slowly. "You might be onto something," he said. That was it. No hesitation. No discussion. No acknowledgement that I was standing right there. The decision didn't happen in that moment. It was confirmed in that moment. They had already thought about this. Already decided it made sense. I just hadn't been included. They waited a week to tell me officially. A full week of normal conversations. Normal dinners. Normal routines. Like nothing had changed. Like my future hadn't already been reassigned. Then the following Sunday, my dad asked me to sit down. Same kitchen. Same table. Jason was already there. Coffee in hand. Relaxed. Like this was just another conversation. I sat across from them. My dad didn't waste time. "I've made a decision about the education funds," he said. "Not we." Not, let's discuss. A decision. Your brother has an opportunity, he continued. A real one? I'm not going to let that slip. I didn't say anything. I just listened. I'm consolidating both accounts under his name. There it was. Clean. Direct. Final. No explanation beyond that. No room for input. Both accounts. All of it. $175,000. Mine. Given away like it was excess. You should think about something more practical. He added. There's good money in trades. Nothing wrong with that. I looked at him, then at Jason, then at my mom. She was standing at the counter again. Same position as the week before. Hands resting on the edge. Eyes down. Not looking at me. Not looking at him. Just staring at the surface like it required her full attention. Mom? I said. She didn't answer. Not even a glance. Just silence. Your mother agrees. My dad said, and something in me shifted. Not anger. Not yet. Something quieter. Clearer. Because in that moment, I understood something I hadn't fully accepted before. There was no one in that room on my side. Not one. I could argue. I could raise my voice. I could try to explain why it was wrong. It wouldn't matter. The decision had already been made. And in that house, once my dad decided something, it didn't get reversed. I sat there for a few seconds, long enough for the weight of it to settle. Then I said one word. Okay. Jason looked relieved. My dad nodded like the conversation had gone exactly as expected. My mom didn't move. I pushed my chair back, stood up, and walked upstairs. No slammed door, no breakdown, just movement, because I knew something they didn't. That wasn't the end of anything. It was the beginning of everything that came next. That one word cost me $175,000. But it also made something very clear. If I stayed in that house, I would spend the rest of my life being evaluated, compared, and reduced to whatever version of me made the most sense for someone else's plan. And I wasn't going to do that. Not anymore. I didn't leave that day. That surprises people when I tell them the story. They expect some dramatic exit. A slammed door. A fight. Maybe me throwing something across the kitchen and storming out like I'd finally had enough. That's not what happened. What happened was math. I had 2 exams left before graduation. 2 days. If I walked out early, I'd lose the one thing I actually needed to start over a high school diploma. Without it, everything got harder. Jobs. School. Even basic applications. So I stayed. I went upstairs, closed my door, and made a plan. First, I checked my bank account. $340. That was it. No backup. No hidden savings. Just what I'd managed to keep from part-time work and small things over the years. Then I opened my laptop and started searching. Room rentals. Cheapest options. Shared spaces. Anywhere within bus distance of something that looked like opportunity. New Haven kept coming up. Not because it was ideal. Because it was affordable. I wrote down addresses. Prices. Contact info. I treated it like a project. No emotion. Just steps. Monday morning. I took my English exam. I didn't think about my family. I didn't think about the money. I focused on the test. Finished it. Handed it in. And walked out. Tuesday. Art history. Easiest 3 hours of my life. Because compared to everything else, memorizing timelines and styles felt simple. Wednesday. Graduation. I put on the cap and gown like nothing had changed. Walked into the gym. Sat in my assigned seat. Listened to speeches I barely remember. They called my name. Emily Carter. I walked across the stage. Shook the principal's hand. Took the diploma. And stepped down. No one from my family was there. Not my dad. Not my mom. Not Jason. They were across the state at one of Jason's events. Something school-related. Something that mattered more. I didn't check. I didn't text. I didn't wait after the ceremony to see if maybe they'd show up late. I walked out of that building and into the parking lot. And I didn't go home. I had packed the night before. 1 backpack, 3 changes of clothes, my laptop, phone charger, a small wooden box my grandmother had left me, and a folded piece of paper I'd carried in my wallet for 2 years, with a name and phone number I'd never called. That was everything. I called an Uber, watched the house disappear in the rearview mirror without saying goodbye. And that was it. No closure. No final conversation. Just distance. New Haven in the summer doesn't care about you. It's loud, humid, crowded, and completely focused on its own pace, which turned out to be exactly what I needed. I found a room in a 3-bedroom apartment within a week. $700 a month. Shared bathroom. 2 roommates I'd never met. One worked night shifts in healthcare. The other played music and kept odd hours. Nobody asked me where I came from. Nobody asked why I was there. That was the best part. I got a job at a coffee shop on Chapel Street. Minimum wage, plus tips. Early mornings. Long lines. Repeating the same orders over and over until it became automatic. It wasn't glamorous. But it was stable. And more importantly, it was mine. I enrolled at a local community college for the fall. Graphic design program. Affordable enough that I could manage it if I worked enough hours and kept my expenses tight. Every decision became practical. Rent. Food. Transportation. Tuition. There was no room for mistakes. About 2 weeks in, my dad called. I didn't answer. He left a voicemail. "You're being dramatic. Emily. Come home and we'll figure this out. There are better options for you." Better options. That phrase again? He left a few more messages after that. Each one shorter. More irritated. My mom called once. Late at night. Quiet voice. "I'm worried about you," she said. "Your father just wants what's best." I stood in the middle of that small apartment, holding the phone, looking at a place that barely fit a bed and a desk. "He gave away my money?" I said. There was a pause. Then she said, "Your father knows what he's doing." That was the moment I stopped expecting anything from her. Not because she didn't care, because she wouldn't act. I hung up and deleted their contact information. Not out of anger. Out of clarity. Jason texted once. A single message in the family group chat. Guess real life hit harder than expected. I didn't reply. I muted the conversation and went back to studying. The first few months were rough. No way around that. I was working early shifts. Going to class. Coming back. Doing assignments. Then going to sleep just to do it again. Some days I ran on 4 hours of sleep and coffee. Some weeks I counted every dollar, like it was the last one I had. There were moments where I thought about going back. Not because I missed them, because it would have been easier, but every time that thought came up, I remembered the kitchen table. I remembered how quickly everything I thought was mine disappeared. And I knew going back meant accepting that version of my life. So I didn't. I kept going. 1 shift at a time. 1 class at a time. No guarantees. No safety net. Just movement. Because if there was one thing I understood now, it was this. No one was coming to fix anything for me. And as uncomfortable as that was, it was also the first honest thing I'd been given. Everything from that point on, every dollar, every opportunity, every step forward, would come from me, not because anyone believed in me, but because I decided I wasn't done yet. I found the number by accident. Not really by accident. But that's what it felt like in the moment. I was sitting on the edge of my bed, going through my bag looking for a pen, and my hand brushed against the wooden box. The one my grandmother left me. I hadn't opened it since I moved. I don't know why I opened it that night. Maybe because I was tired. Maybe because my bank account was sitting at just over $200 and my tuition bill was due in 6 weeks. Maybe because when everything else feels uncertain, you reach for something that reminds you of a time when things made sense. Inside was exactly what I remembered. Measuring tape. Needles. Thread. Small tools that had nothing to do with the life I was trying to build, but somehow still felt important. And underneath it, folded the same way it had been when I first found it. A piece of paper. A name. A phone number. Daniel Brooks. I had been carrying that name in my wallet for 2 years without doing anything about it. At 16, I thought it meant something small. Jewelry. Something sentimental. Not something urgent. At 18, sitting in that apartment with bills stacking up and no safety net, it felt different. It felt like an option. I called the next morning. He picked up on the second ring. Daniel Brooks. His voice was calm. Not rushed. Not distracted. Hi, my name is Emily Carter. I think my grandmother told me to contact you. There was a pause. Not confusion. Recognition. I've been trying to reach you, he said. That got my attention. What do you mean? I've sent letters to your home address over the past 2 years. I didn't say anything for a second, because I knew exactly what that meant. My father had them, and I never saw them. I didn't get anything. I said. I figured. He replied. No surprise in his voice. Just confirmation. He asked me to come into his office. I took 2 buses to get there. It wasn't a big firm. Just a small office in an older building. Law books on shelves. Papers organized in stacks that made sense to him, and probably no one else. He sat me down and got straight to the point. Your grandmother set up a trust, he said. I didn't fully understand what that meant yet. How much? I asked. Not a large amount, he said. $12,000? 12,000. It wasn't life-changing money. But in that moment, it might as well have been everything. He slid a check across the desk, along with a copy of the trust documents. My name was on it, clearly. Intentionally. No conditions. No approvals. No one else involved? Just mine. I stared at it longer than I expected to. Not because of the amount, because someone had planned something for me. Specifically me. Not based on potential. Not based on comparison. Just because I mattered to her. I felt it before I reacted to it. That quiet kind of relief that hits you when you realize you weren't invisible to everyone. I took a breath and nodded. Thank you, I said. He nodded back. Then he reached for another folder. There's something else you should see, he said. That's when the conversation changed. He opened the folder and turned it toward me. Inside was a printed email. From my father. Dated 2 years earlier. Addressed to the bank. I didn't need to read all of it to understand what it was. But I did anyway. A request to withdraw the full balance of my custodial account. $175,000. Transferred into a new account under Jason's name. No explanation. No mention of me beyond the account number. Just instructions. Clean. Direct. Efficient. Like moving money between departments. I felt my stomach drop. But not in a dramatic way. More like something settling into place. Like a piece of information that finally confirmed what I already knew. That account was set up under a UTMA structure. Daniel said. I looked at him. You were the beneficiary. He continued. Your father was the custodian. That means he had a legal responsibility to use those funds for your benefit. For me? I repeated. Yes. I looked back at the paper. Then how did he? He shouldn't have. Daniel said. No hesitation. No soft language. He redirected the funds for someone else. That's a breach of fiduciary duty. There it was. Not unfair. Not wrong. Illegal. I sat there quietly for a moment. So I can do something about it? I asked. Yes, he said. You have legal standing to pursue recovery. Recovery. Getting it back. That should have felt like the obvious next step. But instead, I thought about my father. About the house. About the way he made decisions. About how much control he needed to feel like things were stable. And then I thought about where I was sitting, 2 buses away from a shared apartment. Working minimum wage. Trying to make tuition. Would I win? I asked. Daniel didn't rush the answer. You have a strong case, he said. But litigation takes time. And money? And even if you win, your father would need to have the assets to return it. I understood what he was saying. Winning didn't mean getting anything back. Not necessarily. I looked down at the email again. Four sentence. That's all it took. 4 sentences to move $175,000 out of my life. I folded the paper slowly, carefully. Then I put it back in the folder. I'm not going to sue him, I said. Daniel watched me for a second. Are you sure? I nodded. I don't want his money, I said. I want my own. He didn't argue, just nodded once. The option doesn't expire immediately, he said. If you change your mind, we can revisit it. I stood up, holding the check, the documents, and that email, everything in a simple folder, $12,000, and proof of what had actually happened. When I walked out of that office, nothing about my situation had magically improved. I still had rent, still had tuition, still had to go back to work the next morning. But something had shifted, not externally, internally, because now I knew 2 things for certain. 1, someone had believed in me enough to plan for my future, without asking for anything in return. And 2, everything I had lost wasn't an accident. It was a decision, and if I was going to build anything from this point forward, it wasn't going to come from chasing what was taken. It was going to come from proving I didn't need it. I used the $12,000 carefully. Not emotionally. Not impulsively. Like it was the only shot I was going to get. First thing I paid was tuition. A full year at community college came out to just under $4,000. That gave me time. Time to study without constantly worrying I'd get dropped mid-semester. Then I bought a refurbished iMac. Nothing fancy. Just enough to run design software without crashing every 10 minutes. I added a student license for Adobe. That part hurt more than I expected. But I knew I needed it if I wanted to be taken seriously. The rest of the money went into survival. Rent gaps, bus passes, groceries when tips were low. The kind of expenses nobody talks about but always show up at the worst time. I tracked everything. Every dollar had a purpose. Because I knew once it was gone, there wasn't another backup waiting. The routine got intense. Morning shifts at the coffee shop. Classes during the day. Assignments at night. Then freelance work whenever I could find it. At first, the freelance jobs were small. Logo designs, basic layouts, things people posted online for cheap. $10 an hour. Sometimes less. Clients who didn't know what they wanted and expected you to read their mind. It wasn't glamorous, but it was practice. And more importantly, it was proof. Every completed job. Every small payment. Every client that didn't complain. That was something I could build on. I stopped thinking about what I didn't have. I focused on what I could control. By the end of my first year, I had a 3. Sembilan GP. That mattered. Not because of the number, but because it gave me leverage. I applied to transfer. The University of Hartford accepted me with a scholarship that covered about 70% of tuition. It wasn't a full ride, but it was enough to make the rest possible. I kept working, picked up more freelance projects, took on anything that added to my portfolio. Nights got shorter. Weekends stopped existing, but I didn't slow down. Because for the first time, I could see something forming, not a dream, a direction. The turning point didn't feel like a big moment. No music. No dramatic shift. Just a regular interview on a Tuesday afternoon. A small design firm in Hartford. 12 employees. Mostly residential projects. Nothing flashy. I walked in with my portfolio and sat across from Rachel Bennett. She flipped through my work without saying anything. No comments. No expressions. Just page after page. It went on long enough that I started questioning everything. Maybe I wasn't as good as I thought. Maybe this was where it stopped. Then she closed the folder and looked at me. Who trained you? She asked. My grandmother, I said. And YouTube. That got a reaction. Not a big one, but enough. She leaned back slightly. Your fundamentals are raw, she said. But your spatial thinking is strong. That's harder to teach. I didn't respond. I didn't know how to. She tapped the portfolio once. I don't say this often, she continued. But there's something here. That was it. No exaggeration. No overpraise. Just a statement. And somehow, That meant more than anything else I'd heard before. She offered me the internship, 20 hours a week, $12 an hour, starting Monday. I said yes before she finished the sentence. Working with Rachel was different from anything I had experienced. She didn't hover, didn't give long speeches, didn't try to motivate me. She just gave me work, real work, layouts, revisions, client feedback. And when something wasn't good enough, she said it directly. This doesn't work. Fix the proportions. Think about how people actually move through the space. No sugarcoating. No padding. At first, it was frustrating. Then it became valuable. Because for the first time, someone wasn't evaluating me based on assumptions. They were evaluating the work, and if the work improved, the feedback changed. Simple. Clear. Fair. I started learning faster than I expected. Not just design. How to present ideas. How to listen to clients. How to fix mistakes without making excuses. And Rachel noticed. She didn't say it outright. But the projects got bigger. More responsibility. More trust. One night, after a long day, we were cleaning up the studio, rolling up blueprints, organizing samples. She stopped and looked at me. I don't know what you're running from, she said. But whatever it is, keep going. I didn't answer, because I didn't know how to explain it without turning it into something bigger than it needed to be. So I just nodded and kept working. At that point, I wasn't trying to prove anything to my family anymore. That part had faded. What I was building now had nothing to do with them. It wasn't about getting the money back or making them regret anything. It was about creating something that didn't depend on their decisions at all, something that couldn't be taken away with 4 sentences and a bank transfer. The work got heavier, the schedule got tighter, but the results started showing. Better projects, stronger portfolio, more confidence in what I was doing. Not confidence in myself as a person, confidence in the work. And that was enough. Because once you trust your work, everything else starts to follow. Slowly, steadily, without needing permission. That's when things really started to change. Not all at once, but enough that I could feel it. Like I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was building something. I was at my drafting table the first time I realized my father was still talking about me. Not to me. About me. It came through my aunt. Aunt Susan was the only person in that family who didn't treat my father like the final authority on everything. She didn't challenge him directly. But she paid attention. And when something didn't add up, she asked questions. She called me one afternoon. Hey, honey, are you okay? I kept sketching while I held the phone between my shoulder and ear. I'm fine, I said. Why? There was a pause. Your dad sent out an email, she said. To the family. That got my attention. What kind of email? Another pause. Longer this time. He said you've distanced yourself. That you're going through something. Personal issues. Personal issues? I leaned back in my chair and let that sit for a second. Not surprising. Just calculated. What exactly did he say? I asked. He didn't give details, she said carefully. Just that you've refused help and that the family should be understanding. Understanding of what? That I walked away? Or that he needed a version of the story that didn't make him look like the guy who signed off on taking his daughter's college fund? I didn't respond right away, because I knew exactly what he was doing. He wasn't fixing anything. He was managing perception. That's what he always cared about. Not the truth. The version of the truth that kept him in control. I'm okay, I said finally. If anyone's curious, they can ask him what happened to my college fund. Aunt Susan went quiet. Not because she didn't understand, because she did. I'll keep that in mind, she said. That was her way of saying she'd look into it. We hung up after that, and within a week, I started getting messages. Cousins I hadn't spoken to in years. Thinking of you. Hope you're doing better. Let me know if you need anything. It would have been funny if it wasn't so predictable. Nobody asked what actually happened. They just filled in the blanks with whatever made sense, based on what my father told them. That's the thing about vague accusations. People do the work for you. You don't have to say, she's unstable, or She made bad choices. You just say, she's going through something. And everyone connects the dots in a way that protects the person telling the story. I didn't respond to any of it. Not because I couldn't. Because I didn't have the time or the energy to fight a narrative I didn't create. I had work, class, deadlines. And that mattered more than correcting people who weren't willing to ask the right questions in the first place. But I saved the email. Aunt Susan forwarded it to me. Full list of recipients, timestamp, everything. I didn't know when I'd need it. I just knew I would. Because people who rewrite the story once don't stop. They adjust it whenever they need to. Around the same time, I started hearing about Jason. Not directly. Through the same kind of indirect updates that carried everything else. He left his program. He's working on something new. Big opportunity. The details were always unclear. The tone was always optimistic. Which usually meant the reality wasn't. Then one day, Aunt Susan called again. Different tone this time. Less careful. Your brother moved back home? She said. I didn't react immediately. Okay. He didn't finish the MBA. She added. And whatever business he was trying to start, it didn't work. I leaned back in my chair again, staring at the ceiling. There it was. The investment. The one my father believed had the highest return. Gone. What happened? I asked. I don't think anyone really knows. She said. Something about funding. Clients. It fell apart. Of course it did. Because there was never a real plan. Just confidence and money. And when the money ran out, so did everything else. He's back in his old room. She continued. And your dad, he's still trying to help him. Help him. That meant more money, more support, more resources poured into the same place. How much? I asked. She hesitated. I heard maybe 30 or 40,000 more. She said. I let out a short breath. Not a laugh. Just recognition. My father wasn't going to admit he was wrong. He was going to double down. Until there was nothing left to invest. And your mom? I asked. She started working. Aunt Susan said. Cashier at a grocery store. That one landed differently. Not because of the job. Because of what it meant. My mother had spent most of her life asking for permission to spend money. Now she was earning it herself. At 51. Because everything else had been burned trying to keep Jason's version of potential alive, I sat there for a moment. Letting all of it settle. Jason. Back home. My father. Still pushing money into a situation that had already proven itself. My mother. Working a job she never had to take before. And me. Sitting in a small studio apartment. Building something from scratch. No support. No backup. Just momentum. Does he ever mention me? I asked. I don't know why I asked that. Maybe some part of me still wanted to know if I existed in his version of reality. No. She said. Not really. That made sense. Because acknowledging me would mean acknowledging the outcome. And that didn't fit the narrative. So he left me out of it. Easier that way. Less complicated. Less threatening. I thanked her for the update and hung up. Then I went back to work. Because at that point, none of it changed what I needed to do. Their situation wasn't my responsibility. Their decisions weren't mine to fix. And whatever was happening in that house, it wasn't something I was going back to. Not for closure. Not for explanation. Not for anything. If anything, it confirmed something I had already started to understand. The system my father built, the one where he controlled everything, decided everything, and invested based on his own logic, was starting to crack. Not all at once, but enough that you could see it, and once something like that starts breaking, it doesn't stop. It just takes time before everyone else sees it too. I let the silence sit for a few seconds after my father said, "We're here because we're family." Not to make a point, just to see who would speak next. Jason tried first. He leaned forward, elbows on the table, like he was about to pitch something again. Sam posture. Different room. Look, he said. I'm not here to argue about the past. Things didn't go the way we expected. I've got a few things in motion right now. And I thought maybe you could take a look. Give me some direction. Direction. That was a cleaner word than help. I picked up my pen and tapped it once against the legal pad. Are you asking for advice or funding? I asked. He hesitated. Advice, he said. Then, after a second, maybe a little support if it makes sense. There it was. Same conversation, different setting. I nodded slowly. Okay. I said, then let's keep it clear. I turned the legal pad slightly toward him. Scope of work? Timeline. Expected outcomes. I said, we can treat this like any other consulting project. Jason blinked. I'm your brother, he said, and I'm running a business. I replied. My father shifted in his chair. This isn't how family talks to each other, he said. I looked at him. Calm. Direct. This isn't how family treats each other either. That landed. Not loudly, but it landed. My mother's hands tightened around the tissue she'd been holding since she sat down. Jason leaned back. Frustrated now. Why are you making this complicated? He said. I just need a little help getting back on my feet. I held his gaze. You had $175,000? I said. That was your head start? His jaw tightened. That's not fair, he said. Dad made that decision. I didn't look at my father when I answered. You spent it? I said. Silence again. The kind that doesn't move unless someone forces it to. My father did. He leaned forward. Voice lower now. I did what I thought was right, he said. I looked at two kids and made a decision based on potential. That's what a parent does. There it was. No apology. Just justification. I nodded once. I know. I said. And I made mine. He frowned slightly. What decision? To leave? I said. And not come back? That wasn't new information. But saying it in that room made it real in a way it hadn't been before. Jason exhaled sharply. So that's it? He said. You just cut us off forever? I didn't answer right away. I let the question sit there. Because the answer mattered. Not forever. I said, just until things are clear. My father's eyes narrowed. Clear about what? I reached into my folder. Slowly. No dramatic. Just deliberate. I pulled out a single sheet of paper and placed it on the table in front of him. He didn't touch it. He didn't have to. He knew exactly what it was. That's the email you sent to the bank? I said, transferring my account into Jason's name. Jason looked at it. Then at my father. My mother's head turned slowly toward him. What email? She whispered. My father didn't answer her. He kept his eyes on the paper. You never mentioned my education. I continued. Or my needs. Just an account number and instructions. I tapped the edge of the document lightly. That's not a family decision. I said, that's a legal one. Jason shifted in his seat. Emily. Come on. I held up a hand. Not aggressive. Just enough to stop him. I'm not done. He leaned back again. Frustrated. I looked at my father. You had a fiduciary responsibility. I said. That money was legally designated for my benefit. You moved it anyway. His expression changed. Not anger. Something else. Recognition. Because this wasn't an emotional argument anymore. This was something he couldn't talk around. Where did you get this? He asked. A lawyer. I said. The one Grandma set up for me? The one whose letters never made it to me. That hit my mother. She turned fully toward him now. You intercepted letters? She asked. Still no answer. The room felt smaller, not physically, but in the way tension fills space. Jason tried again. Look. Whatever happened back then. We're here now. He said. We can fix this. I looked at him. No. I said, simple. Direct. No room to negotiate. We can't fix it. I continued. We can only be honest about it. My father finally looked up from the paper. And what does that look like to you? He asked. I leaned back in my chair. Not defensive. Not aggressive. Just steady. 3 things. I said. I held up one finger. A real apology. I said. Not I'm sorry you feel that way. Not I did what I thought was best. An actual acknowledgement of what you did? Second finger. Accountability. I said. Not reframing it. Not minimizing it. Just calling it what it was. Third. Respect. I said. For the life I built without you? Without trying to step back in and take control of it. No one spoke? Not immediately. My mother's eyes were wet again. But she wasn't looking down this time. She was looking at me. Actually looking. Jason stared at the table. My father sat still. Completely still. Then he exhaled. Long. Slow. I'm not going to sit here and be accused in my daughter's office. He said. That's your choice. I replied. I stood up. Not abruptly. Just enough to signal the end. I'm not lending money. I said. I'm not revising the past. And I'm not pretending this is something it's not. I picked up the business card from the table and slid it back into my folder. If you want to work with me, I added. You can go through my assistant. Jason shook his head slightly. Like he couldn't believe what he was hearing. My father stood, slowly, adjusted his jacket. The wrong button. He didn't fix it. My mother stood last. She took a step toward me. Stopped. Your grandmother would be proud, she said quietly. I nodded. I know. That was all I gave her. They walked out after that. Through the glass doors. Past the desks. Past the people who didn't know them. The elevator closed. And just like that, they were gone again. But this time, it wasn't me leaving. It was them. And they weren't taking anything with them. I sat in that conference room for a while after they left. Not thinking about what I should have said differently. Not replaying the conversation. Just sitting there. Letting the quiet settle back into something normal. The email was still on the table. Pour sentence. Same as always. I picked it up. Folded it along the same crease it had been folded on before. And slid it back into the folder. Then I went back to work. Because that's what my life was built on now. Not reactions. Not arguments. Work. Saturday came faster than I expected. The gala was held at the convention center downtown. Big room. Bright lights. People dressed like they had something to celebrate. 300 attendees. Business owners. Executives. Local press. The kind of room my father used to talk about, like it was a benchmark. I checked in. Got my name tag. And found my table. Rachel was already there. She stood up when she saw me. You clean up well? She said. Don't get used to it. I replied. She smiled. Handed me a glass of water. And pointed to the stage. Just speak clearly. She said. You've already done the hard part. That was the thing about Rachel. She didn't overcomplicate anything. I looked around the room. People talking. Laughing. Taking photos. A few of my coworkers were there. My assistant. 2 designers from the team. They waved when they saw me. No family. I didn't expect them to be there. And for the first time, that didn't feel like something missing. It just felt accurate. They started calling names around 8:45. Each person walked up. Gave a short speech. Thanked the usual people. Then they called mine. Emily Carter. Co-founder. Carter and Bennett Design. I walked to the stage. No hesitation. No second guessing. Just steps. I adjusted the microphone and looked out at the room. 300 people. None of them knew what it took to get me there. And that was fine. 5 years ago. I said. I had $340 and a high school diploma. The room got quieter. Someone I trusted told me I didn't have real potential. I continued. That I should pick something more practical. A few people shifted in their seats. He was right about one thing. I said. I did learn a trade. I paused. I learned how to build something from nothing. That landed, not dramatically, but enough. I want to thank my partner. Rachel Bennett. I said. She didn't rescue me. She hired me. There's a difference. Rachel nodded once from her seat. I want to thank my professors. I continued. The people who treated me like I belonged before I believed it myself. Then I took a breath. And I want to thank my grandmother. That one hit differently. She left me $12,000 and a lesson. I said, "Your skills and your thinking are the only things no one can take from you." I looked out at the room again. That turned out to be true. Applause started before I finished. Not loud at first. Then it built. People stood. Not everyone, but enough that I noticed. I didn't stay on stage long after that. No long ending. No emotional breakdown. I stepped down, shook a few hands, and went back to my table. Rachel leaned over. "That was exactly right," she said. I nodded. "Felt like it," I replied. Later that night, I got home, took off the blazer, set my heels by the door, and checked my mail. There was one envelope. No return address. Handwritten. I knew the handwriting immediately. Me mum. I opened it at the kitchen counter. No delay. No hesitation. "Emily." It started. "No, dear." No formal tone. Just my name. "I watched your speech," she wrote. "Aunt Susan sent it to me." I kept reading. "I need to say something I should have said years ago. I failed you." I stopped there for a second. Not because I was shocked. Because she said it directly. No excuses. No soft language. "I was there when your father made that decision," she continued. "I knew it was wrong. And I said nothing." I leaned against the counter. Just reading. I told myself I was keeping the peace. She wrote. "I wasn't. I was avoiding conflict." "And you paid for that?" That line stayed with me. "You paid for that?" No deflection. No shared blame. Just ownership. "I don't expect forgiveness," she wrote. "But I need you to know. I see it now." Then the part I didn't expect. "I've contacted a lawyer. I'm leaving." I read that again. Slowly. "I should have done it years ago," she wrote. "But I'm doing it now." At the bottom. Just, "Mom." I folded the letter and set it on the table. I didn't cry right away. I just stood there. Because that wasn't the ending I thought I'd get. Not from her. Not like that. My father never reached out. Not after the meeting. Not after the gala. Not after the letter. Nothing. And that made sense too. Because admitting he was wrong would mean admitting everything that came from that decision was built on a mistake. And he wasn't going to do that. Jason texted once. "Congrats on the award." 5 words. No apology. No acknowledgement. Just enough to say he noticed. I didn't respond. Because there wasn't anything to respond to. A few weeks later, I sat down with Daniel again. Same office. Same desk. Same folder. "You still have time if you want to pursue the case," he said. I looked at the paperwork. The numbers. The evidence. Everything I would need to take it back. Then I closed the folder. "I'm good," I said. He nodded. No pressure. No follow-up. Just understanding. Because at that point, it wasn't about the money. It hadn't been for a while. It was about what I built without it. The office. The team. The work. Everything that couldn't be taken with a signature or a transfer. If I sued, I might win. But I'd also be tying myself back to something I had already walked away from. And I wasn't interested in going backward. That chapter was done. Not because it was resolved. Because I chose to stop carrying it. These days, my life is simple in ways it never used to be. I wake up. Go to work. Solve problems. Build things. Pay my bills. Make decisions that don't require anyone else's approval. No one controls what I do. No one redirects what's mine. And no one gets to define what I'm capable of based on what makes sense to them. If there's one thing I've learned through all of this, it's this. People will show you exactly how they see you. Not in what they say, in what they invest in. Their time, their attention, their money. And when that doesn't line up with who you are or what you're trying to build, you have a choice. Wait for them to change. Or build something that doesn't depend on them at all. I chose the second one. And if you're in a place where someone has already decided your limits for you, you don't need their permission to prove them wrong.